This clip is brought to you by SaveWithConrad.com. There's a lot to unpack here on the show. I want to get to it, but I also want to talk about some news and notes, because the gist is Titan's in bad financial shape. Titan Sports has lost millions of dollars over the past few years due to a combination of major decrease in revenue from house shows, a decline in pay-per-view buy rates, major legal bills, and high real estate bills. And rumors went around wrestling like crazy over the past week about how serious the condition is. Although there was no way to really know what the long-term effects are, the two indications are that Titan was really in trouble would be for the McMahon family to sell a percentage of the company to outsiders, which hasn't happened, in order to raise funding. This is something I believe the McMahons would only do as a last resort. The other real sign of danger would be a move from Titan Towers to a less expensive office setup. Since neither has happened, I don't take any of the talk of impending doom too seriously. Although clearly this is a company facing a major downsizing, as Jim Crockett Promotions in 87 and 88 and the UWFI in 94 and 95 showed, it doesn't take long for a wrestling company that looks to be thriving on the surface to get financially overextended and cease to exist. The thing that sticks out to me, because we've talked about almost all of this so far, but high real estate bills, was it often thought of at the time that Titan Towers was an albatross of sorts? Man, this is such an expensive, fancy building, and maybe we're overspending here.
I don't think so. I mean, again, we needed office space, and it was not like, oh, hey, let's move over to this office building because it's fancy office space. It was, we needed to move because we had grown out of the several offices that we were in at the time, and to be able to consolidate the office into one building, excluding the studio at that time.
It's pretty remarkable that the news of the WWF's sort of poor financial state really gets out there and becomes a story when a lot of the PR people are let go, because that's usually who the media is communicating with. So multi-channel news would even do a story on the dismissal of Skip, who had been the head of Titan's pay-per-view department, as quote unquote being well respected within that industry. And as a result of these news stories, some cable operators begin to question, hey, is our cash cow leaving? Because they've really been the juggernaut of pay-per-view for a long, long time. And I don't know that maybe that was not something Vince thought about, that, hey, our spokesperson who's handled all this media spin stuff for us for so long, if they're gone now, maybe this gets a little more rampant. Clearly they survived. Didn't really matter. But there are going to be a lot of other names who are going to be on the outs. Even more questions about the financial stability of the company were being asked after all sorts of rumored wrestling cuts took place this past week. While a complete list is not yet available, those believed to have been dropped include the former Barbarian, whose position was dropped when Fatu was made a single, managers Afa and Lou Albano, Doink and Dink, television announcer Stephanie Wyand, Duke Drose, and road agent Tony Gurria. There are many other names that are expected to be dropped between now and September, the biggest names on that list being King Kong Bundy and Hakushi. In addition, Mantar, the Heavenly Bodies, and Techno Team 2000 will be phased down and get limited, if any, bookings after a few more weeks. The only real surprises to me on the list are Doink and Dink, and even though the gimmick has more than run its course, the WWF has merchandised them heavily and even brought forth a lawsuit against Matt Osborne a few weeks ago to enforce their trademark. Talk is that there will be less B shows in the future to go along with the cutback in television costs, going from 51 TV tapings down to just 26 TV tapings. Man, a lot of heads rolling here. Lou Albano sticks out to me, and Tony Gurria as being longtime WWF guys. What do you remember about them getting their walking papers here?
Well, that's probably about the 100th time that Tony had gotten his walking papers. The same thing with Lou. But they were, look, making cuts is not easy.
Right.
And it's extremely unpleasant. Sometimes you have to look at your bottom line, and you have to look at your roster and everyone in the company and what have you. And sometimes you have to make cuts. They're hard. They're unfortunate. They affect people's lives. And it's not something that's just flippantly done. It's just say, okay, we'll get rid of these guys. You have to put a lot of thought into it, and you have to also accept the responsibility when you do make cuts and move on. But you have to do what's right for the company at the time.
Let's get to the pay-per-view. We're finally here, July 23rd, In Your House 2. It's the Nashville Municipal Auditorium. Meltzer would say it was an easy thumbs up, although he was a little surprised by the responses from the readers. He says, I've seen plenty of better WWF and WCW pay-per-view shows that didn't get anywhere near the level of positive response that this show got. I'm not sure if that's an indication of decreasing expectations, and thus 1 outstanding match, 3 better than average, and 2 bad matches constitutes an excellent show nowadays, or simply that people vary their responses based on the price tag. And since this show was only $14.95, less is expected than the other shows. But in comparison to King of the Ring, the WWF rebounded big time. In fact, the readers of the Wrestling Observer gave this 88.7% thumbs up. So if that's any indication and you haven't seen this show, go out of your way to go watch In Your House #2 on the WWE Network. 88.7, that's pretty damn good. Thumbs down is only 4.4%. Thumbs in the middle is 6.9%. Let's talk about something else that really caught my attention. WWF President Linda McMahon sent out a business statement on July 11th, stressing a need to constantly adapt to marketplace changes, talking about going direct merchandising through online services, and that licensing and international television deals have exceeded projections, and that the first In Your House exceeded internal projections. In regard to the changes, McMahon wrote, quote, we are moving forward, but we must consolidate and streamline some areas and change the management systems in order to operate efficiently. Some positions will be lost, and the transition phase will require everyone's cooperation. When additions are necessary for growth, they will be added. So this is basically her saying, we got to become more efficient. And that means some of you got to go, with the hope that, hey, when business picks up, you can come back. Do you think when those 3 names in particular that we mentioned, Steve, Rex, and Skip, do you think they left thinking, hey, maybe there's a chance to come back when business turns around? Or was this see you later, although that means never?
I think actually Steve came back at some point.
I thought so, because I remember seeing his name. It feels like later in the 90s.
Yeah, but I think that they all thought that there's a possibility of coming back, but no promise.
Is this the era where you've joked about, or it's been joked about, that Vince even removed the water coolers from headquarters?
I think this was about that time. You know, that seems to be much bigger news to people like Dave Meltzer and Eric Bischoff that love to talk about. They even took the water coolers out.
What year was it? You've told me before. I don't even think we were recording a show. We were just talking in real life about sort of the ebbs of WWF business and how sometimes it's great and sometimes it's not. Vince don't sell shit for nobody, blah, blah, blah. But there was a moment of frustration you told me about once where you said, I had to pull whatever number of millions out of my ass. When was that?
I mean, that was right in this time. And it was
tell the story for our listeners who've never heard it.
Well, people think that Vince is this horrible human being that, whose middle name is Beelzebub, and that he just didn't care about people, didn't care about anything but the bottom line. And it was during a time we were not a publicly held company, and Vince and Linda privately held that company. And when the company's losing money, Vince was taking out of his own pocket while losing millions of dollars, and would make sure that everyone was paid each pay period out of his own ass, out of his own side, privately funding that. But his thing was, he wasn't going to miss a payday for people, because he had too many people that were depending on him. And that was a level of frustration that he just had to keep putting back into the company instead of just folding up shop and saying, okay, shit, we're losing too much money. I think Vince would have put every single penny he had in the company and mortgaged everything he owned and found ways to get loans to do it. But Vince didn't want to do that, didn't want to mortgage everything to the hilt and borrow a bunch of money. He wanted to make sure that he did it himself. So yeah, the money came out of his ass, and the money came from him specifically. So yeah, it was a major frustration.
It's so remarkable. I mean, when you really think about it, imagine for a minute if Vince had said, okay, my financial advisors and all the people who help me manage my personal wealth have said that, you know, this is not good for me. And I've had a conversation with my wife, and she's agreed that we need to just, take our purse and go home, because they had built amassed an incredible personal wealth, but now the business is losing money. And so Vince is pulling money out of his own personal coffers, out of his personal investments, and funding the company with it because it's literally losing cash. And I think he probably could have gotten some advice from different folks to say, yes, you could cut X, Y, and Z, and maybe that would make it more palatable. But Vince, with this large sum of wealth you've accumulated for yourself, why are you fooling with this? Why don't you just go rest on your laurels a little bit and come up with a new idea in a few years, take a few years off? And wrestling, by and large, would have been different forever. And I don't know that it would exist the way it does now had Vince not dug into his personal coffers, because it's not like WCW at this point was exactly innovating.
No. But Vince had faith in what the hell, he wanted to do, knew that he could do it. So,
and passion for wrestling. I mean, I know that sometimes wrestling fans online will say, oh, Vince hates wrestling. Clearly he doesn't hate the wrestling business, because if you hated the wrestling business, this is your excuse to leave. It's losing money. Wash your hands of it. It's no longer a cash cow. But to throw your own cash behind it tells me he has a passion for this.
Well, without a doubt, he wouldn't be in it all this time if he didn't.
Hey, it's Conrad Thompson. Thanks for checking out the podcast here on YouTube. Be sure to hit the subscribe button and the notifications bell so you get a notice anytime we upload some new content. And go save yourself some money right now. If you're in a 30-year loan or you have credit card debt, it's not a matter of if I can save you money. It's a matter of how much. Find out right now for free at SaveWithConrad.com.